I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was just running a pre-call systems check for the quarterly strategy briefing, making sure the audio feed was stable before the board dialed in. But when I joined early, their cameras were already on, and so were their microphones. That's when I heard Noah, the new COO, still fresh from some overfunded West Coast startup, lean back in his chair and laugh. Elena Brandt, she's like a museum exhibit, polished, permanent, but no one really looks anymore. The others laughed. Someone added, "She's dependable, just outdated." And then another voice, I don't even know who, said, "You don't build the future with filing cabinets." I froze. Not because it was the first time someone underestimated me, but because it was the first time they did it so openly, like I was already gone, like I didn't matter. I had spent 17 years building the security infrastructure they were about to lean on for international expansion. The systems they brag about in investor decks, I designed them. I patched breaches, trained engineers, coded during fire drills, and missed birthdays for uptime. And yet, to them, I was a punchline in a private meeting, one they thought no one else could hear. Before I take you through what happened next, where in the world are you listening from right now? And tell me, have you ever been made to feel like your time was up simply because you weren't shiny or loud? Drop your thoughts in the comments. You never know, your story might help someone else feel seen. I started at Transepticor when we were still renting the second floor of a half-empty tech park outside Dallas. No branded mugs, no company swag. Just 5 engineers, 3 folding desks, and a dream that one day we'd become the backbone of next-gen logistics security. Back then, I was just Alina, 24, fresh out of UT Austin, still nervous I might bring down the entire network if I misconfigured a single node. I remember the clunky terminals, the humming server racks that barely held up under testing loads, and the smell of burned coffee that somehow never left the air. But I showed up every morning with something to prove. And I stayed late enough for the night shift to start wondering if I lived there. I learned fast, not because I was the smartest, but because I asked better questions than most people twice my age. Within 5 years, I'd built the company's first internal access protocol, a scrappy little thing called PulseLayer. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. It grew with us, scaled to fit our first international expansion, and kept us protected when no one else was even thinking about credential separation. When PulseLayer hit its limits, I built Core X from scratch. I coded it piece by piece across time zones, testing it on real-world latency in the middle of red-eye flights at client data centers. It became our spine, invisible, quiet, essential. We had 0 system-wide failures for over a decade. No external breach ever made it past our walls. And when it came time to patent the architecture, I didn't put my name in bold. I filed it under the company's banner, because loyalty meant something to me. So no, I wasn't loud. I didn't demand recognition. I just kept the lights on while others chased headlines. And maybe that's exactly why they thought I could be replaced. But something happened a few weeks after Noah came on board, something I couldn't ignore. And it started with a missing meeting invite. At first it was subtle. The org chart didn't change overnight. There were no memos, no press releases, just a quiet shift in tone. The way people paused when I entered a meeting room. The way Noah, our new COO, stopped looking me in the eye when he spoke about agile transformation or streamlining legacy oversight. He used that word a lot, legacy. At first, I thought I was imagining things. A missing Slack thread here. Forgot to loop you in there. Then one Friday afternoon, I saw a welcome post on the company portal. A new hire, Derek Lin. Title, Director of Systems Integration. That was odd. That role didn't exist before. The description, nearly identical to mine. I scrolled through his background. Mid-30s, Stanford grad, stints at 2 AI startups, 1 exit. Not a bad resume, but nowhere near the hours I'd logged under pressure, the nights spent manually isolating access points to protect live credentials. Still, the team seemed excited. Derek had fresh perspective. He brought momentum. A few days later, he was leading the weekly systems call. My camera was on, my mic was unmuted, but no one asked for my input. Derek shared a slide I had created 2 quarters ago without attribution, and no one blinked. It was like I was a piece of the furniture, still in the room technically, but no longer needed. I brought it up with Noah casually. "Hey, I saw the org update, just wanted to check in on roles and responsibilities." He smiled. "Don't worry, Alina, we're just rebalancing. You've got so much historical knowledge, that's still valuable." Still valuable. I heard the past tense even if he didn't say it out loud. I didn't argue, but something in me shifted. And the next time I opened my permissions dashboard, I noticed something else was missing. It started with a failed login. Nothing dramatic, no flashing red error, no system crash, just a quiet message at the top of my screen. "Admin access not recognized. Please contact your system administrator." I blinked, refreshed the page, tried again. Same message. At first, I assumed it was a permission sync delay. They happen sometimes after large system updates. But something didn't sit right. I wasn't accessing a client environment or an outdated portal. This was the core permissions dashboard, the one I'd helped build from scratch, the one I used weekly for compliance audits, credential audits, and real-time patching. I opened my secondary console. Same thing. Then I checked the DevOps calendar. That's when I noticed I hadn't been invited to the infrastructure planning sync for the Chicago node rollout. I thought maybe it was an oversight until I saw the meeting summary posted in the shared channel with action items assigned to Derek and a new junior engineer named Maya. The two of them had discussed protocols I personally authored without me in the room. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself it was a miscommunication. But when I submitted a request ticket to reinstate my access, it never got a reply. No approval, no escalation, just silence. A few days later, I ran into Derek in the hallway. He gave me a smile, all teeth. "Hey, Elena, heard you're transitioning into more of an advisory role. Congrats, that's a huge win." I didn't respond, because I hadn't been told I was transitioning into anything. That night, I stayed late. The office was nearly empty. I sat at my desk staring at the empty access field, wondering how many decisions had already been made without me, and how long I'd been kept in the dark. The next morning, something landed in my inbox, not from our team. It was a message from New York, and it changed everything. The message came at 6:14 a.m., time-stamped and quiet, buried beneath a dozen unread emails. The subject line was simple: "Re-credential anomaly, need a second look." It was from Samir Gavari, a systems analyst with the third-party firm we'd started working with in New York. I'd spoken to him once briefly during a systems alignment call. Smart guy. Young but sharp. The kind of engineer who noticed details most people ignored. His message wasn't long, but the words made me sit up straight. "Hi, Elena. I hope it's okay to reach out directly. We were reviewing credential mapping across the East Coast clusters and noticed some unusual routing through an outdated access path on the Chicago node. It's coming from inside your core environment, but doesn't match any of the user logs we were given. Thought you should see it." Attached was a packet of raw access logs. I opened them immediately. Samir was right. Someone had spun up a new admin credential, granted full control on a high-sensitivity channel without a corresponding approval trail. No ticket, no redundancy, no two-factor flag. It was a ghost credential, the kind you only see in internal breaches or rushed unauthorized deployments. My stomach tightened. I cross-checked the logs against the credential tree I had backed up before my access was revoked. The new credential wasn't there, meaning it had been added after I was removed and buried so deep in the system it bypassed our standard alerts. Minutes later, another email dropped in a confidential alert from our Chicago liaison. A major client, Charterstone Financial, had pulled out of their pending contract. They cited a data mismatch. Technical issues, they called it. The deal was worth over $8 million. I knew it wasn't just a glitch, but when I tried to report it, the response I got wasn't what I expected. I didn't write it in anger. No exclamation points, no emotional appeals, just clean lines, headings, bullet points, system logs, risk matrices. I'd written hundreds of internal security memos before, but this one felt different, like the last door I could knock on before walking away entirely. The subject line was Clinical Credential Discrepancy, Core Access Exposure, Urgent Review. I detailed everything the unsanctioned admin credential Samir flagged, the timestamp anomalies, the loss of the Charterstone contract. I attached screenshots, included encrypted logs, and cited 2 compliance clauses that were potentially being violated. I even offered 3 action plans, one of which involved me stepping aside if that's what it took to get the problem investigated properly. I CC'd everyone who needed to know legal risk, DevSecOps, even the assistant CTO. I wasn't looking to stir panic. I just wanted someone, anyone, to read the damn thing and take it seriously. I hit send. Then waited. An hour passed. Nothing. 2 hours. Still silence. By the 4th hour, I had almost convinced myself it was being escalated behind the scenes. That someone was quietly investigating, looping in internal security, maybe prepping a response. Then the reply came. It was 3 sentences. No greeting, no signature. Thank you for your input, Elena. We've reviewed your concerns and consider them non-actionable at this time. Please continue focusing on current transition priorities. That was it. After 17 years, I got a pat on the head and a directive to stand down. But I didn't. Instead, I opened a different terminal, one almost no one knew still existed. A compliance relay I'd helped build years ago, back when the company actually cared about internal accountability. It wasn't monitored in real time, but every quarter it flagged anomalies for legal audit. I forwarded my memo there. And then I added something else. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from stress exactly, more like something unresolved, gnawing at the back of my mind, a thread I hadn't pulled in years. So I got up, made tea, and opened my old drive. Somewhere in that clutter of scanned PDFs and archived contracts, I remembered there was something I had written long ago, back when we were still a team of 12, back when every update had to be printed, signed in pen, and counter-initialed before implementation. I opened the original employment agreement I signed in 2008. It was outdated now, superseded in some areas by modern digital policy, but still legally binding in the core sections. I scrolled past the standard language, compensation, non-compete, IP ownership, and then I found it. Clause 21.7, System Contingency Authority. My eyes froze on the words. In the event that the primary architect of Transcepta Core infrastructure systems is removed from operational access without prior written authorization by a human executive and without biometric override clearance contingency protocol, IRIS shall activate. I read it again, then again. It wasn't just a clause. It was a trigger. A buried safeguard, one I'd quietly drafted and convinced the former CTO to sign off on after a scare in 2011 when we came seconds away from losing our West Coast backbone due to an unvetted software push. I'd written IRIS as a last resort, not to protect me, but to protect the system. From recklessness, from exactly this kind of careless purge done without understanding the architecture beneath the surface. And the clause? Still active, still enforceable. I sat in silence for a long time, the glow of the screen casting shadows across my living room. They had forgotten. I hadn't. But to trigger IRIS, a specific condition had to be met, a condition no one would ever trigger, unless they were truly careless. And that's exactly what they did next. It came at 5:47 a.m., No phone call, no meeting invite, just a sterile email tucked between a team lunch reminder and a billing invoice. The subject line simply read, "Termination confirmed, effective immediately. No greeting, no explanation, no name. Just 4 cold words and a timestamp." For a second, I thought it was a phishing attempt. I hovered over the sender, no red flags. The address was real no reply at transceptacore.com, one of the auto-generated corporate inboxes we used for onboarding and offboarding workflows. That's when I knew. It was real. After 17 years, I had been dismissed by a bot. No exit interview, no offboarding formality, no human acknowledgement that I had once helped keep this company alive when its systems were on the verge of collapse. Just deleted. I sat there staring at the screen. Not shocked exactly, I'd seen it coming. But even knowing it, the moment still hit like ice in the lungs. And then something strange happened. My eyes drifted back to the phrase, termination confirmed. 3 words that shouldn't have meaning more. But in the quiet, something inside me stirred. A memory, faint but sharp. That exact phrase. I had chosen it for a reason. Back when I designed Protocol Iris, the failsafe buried deep inside the architecture, I'd included a trigger. Not a button, not a manual override, just a phrase. A line so detached, so robotic, it would only ever come from an automated system, never a person. Termination confirmed. It was the key, the ignition. My hand moved to the old laptop I hadn't used in years. I powered it up, watched the system hum to life, logged into a private console that no one remembered existed. The access code still worked, and across the world, quietly, the system began to listen. What happened next wasn't personal, it was protocol. The console screen blinked once, then held steady. I sat still, hands off the keyboard, eyes fixed on the lines of code beginning to unspool like a quiet thread unraveling beneath the surface. This wasn't a command. I hadn't typed a single instruction. I didn't need to. Protocol Iris had already recognized the trigger. The phrase had been parsed, termination confirmed, and the logic tree did the rest. Step by step, node by node. No drama, no explosions, just precision. The Frankfurt credential tree was the first to clear. Then came Miami internal keys flushed and revalidated. By the time Chicago's admin layer began revoking external vendor tokens, I could hear the heating kick on in my apartment. The world outside was still asleep, but inside the system, it had begun. Each cascade was designed to look like a maintenance cycle. That's what made Iris so effective. It didn't set off alarms. It followed protocol. It revoked credentials with no public alerts, rerouted data channels, disabled APIs silently. It was self-cleaning, surgical, and it didn't break things. It protected them from misuse, from corruption, from ignorance dressed up as innovation. On the surface, it probably looked like a routine failure, maybe a brief outage, a permission sync gone wrong. But from inside, from here, where I watched the dashboard update in real time, it was clear what was happening. They hadn't just removed me, they'd removed the anchor. And the system, like any living organism, was simply reacting to a sudden trauma, shutting down paths that no longer had a verified heartbeat. I didn't smile, I didn't cry, I just watched. At 6:21 a.m., New York's core financial cluster went dark, the same one used by 3 of our top-tier clients for real-time trade clearance. And a minute later, my phone lit up. Incoming call, Noah Rylance. No subject line, no agenda, just one name on the screen, the one who pulled the trigger. I let it ring twice before I answered. There was no hello, no pause, just Noah's voice, brittle and shaking. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't respond right away. I could hear chaos behind him, overlapping voices, fingers slamming on keyboards, someone shouting about lost access in Singapore. The sound of control slipping through cracks, too small for them to even see. "Frankfurt's offline," he barked. "New York just went black. You need to fix this, right now." His voice cracked at the word now. It wasn't authority anymore, it was fear. I stayed calm, not out of pride, but because there was nothing left to panic over. The system was no longer responding to me. It was following its rules, rules I had written long before he ever joined this company. "You triggered Protocol Iris," I said evenly, "with your own message." He paused, long enough for me to hear his breath hitch. "What are you talking about? That's not even... What the hell is Iris?" I leaned forward in my chair, watching as Singapore's admin ports throttled to 0. Clause 21.7, I said. My contract from 2008. Still active, still enforceable. He went quiet again. I could almost picture it, him scrolling through archived HR documents, fingers trembling over his trackpad, finally realizing there was a clause he never read, buried beneath years of digital arrogance and fast-track restructuring. "That's insane," he whispered. "You built a bomb into our infrastructure." "Not a bomb," I replied. "A seatbelt. You just cut it mid-collision." The line went silent. I imagined the boardroom blinking screens, frozen logins, legal teams whispering, "Is this real?" behind their hands. "Can you reverse it?" he finally asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I opened my inbox, because another name had just appeared, one I hadn't seen in years, and she wasn't calling in a panic. She was calling for clarity. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten lawsuits or leak anything to the press. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened a clean email draft, no emojis, no urgency, no drama, and attached 2 files. The first was a scanned copy of my original contract signed in ink back in 2008, highlighted in soft yellow, Clause 21.7, System Contingency Authority. The second was a system log file, timestamped precisely at 5:47 a.m., showing the moment Iris initiated Cascade after parsing the phrase, "Termination confirmed." Subject line, "Triggered by design." No body text. No explanation. Just evidence. I sent it to the executive board, CC'd legal, and BCC'd no one. Then I closed the tab. Not out of spite, but because the truth didn't need embellishment. It just needed to be seen. That's what dignity looks like. Not silence because you're powerless, but silence because the facts are loud enough. In another tab, news was already trickling through the system outages. Across 3 continents, systems reverting to zero trust protocols, credential resets, blocking entire divisions. But I didn't monitor the fallout. I just sat there wrapping up. I unplugged my backup drive, archived my last personal folder, and slid a Post-it across my desk. It simply read, "Never confuse stability with invisibility." I left it there. By late afternoon, a new message appeared. Not from HR, not from Noah, but from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, Catherine Voss, the former CTO, now retired. Her note was brief, handwritten, scanned. "You were the firewall, Elena. They only realized it when they unplugged you." I read it twice, and then I heard a familiar voice behind me, quiet, uncertain. It wasn't a colleague. It was my daughter. She had something to tell me. That night, I didn't check for updates. Didn't watch the board scramble or wait for someone to call with apologies too late to matter. I powered down the console, the same one I built during a network collapse 12 years ago, and closed the lid for the last time. The system had done its job. It protected itself even when the people behind it failed to. I didn't return to Transepticor. There was no need. They didn't just lose a system architect, they lost the blueprint for how to build trust. But what they couldn't erase was legacy. A few weeks later, I got an email from a nonprofit tech group I'd long admired. No stock options, no grandstanding, just a single line. "We believe security should serve people, not just shareholders. Would you consider joining us?" I haven't said yes, not yet. But knowing I could choose freely, without fear, without silence, felt like the most valuable offer of all. That same evening, my daughter came into my office, phone in hand, eyes bright. "Mom, I got into the cybersecurity program. I want to do what you do." And in that moment, something heavy inside me lifted. Not because the past had been fixed, but because the future finally felt open again. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes you don't need to shout to make an impact. Sometimes the quiet ones write the lines of code that outlast the chaos. And sometimes your calm is the loudest voice in the room. What would you do if the thing you built, the thing they tried to take from you, ended up being the one thing that protected you? Have you ever walked away with your dignity when others tried to erase it? Share your story. Someone out there might need to hear it.